I'm
7
just,
o'clock?
it is 7 and we are live.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Andy, would you mind checking in the over the attendees, see if there's any
Will
sign of
do.
Mr. Conrath over there?
Will do.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Newburyport Historical Commission meeting of Thursday, the 12th of November, 2020. It's a virtual meeting via Zoom. We'll begin with a roll call, but so usually I do them in alphabetical order. I've arranged them, but I'm going to hold off on Mr. Carnwath, who would be first, because we'll see if we can find him over in the attendees. Long story there, but anyway, Mr. Fay.
Present.
Okay, Mr. McNamee.
Present.
Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, you were here a second ago.
I'm here. Yes,
Oh,
present.
there you
Thank
are.
you.
Okay. Patricia Pecknick is joining late, so Andy or Caitlin, do let us know when she joins, so the minute taker can note that. And
Will
Ron
do.
Ziemba.
Here.
Yep, you're here. And me, the chair. This is Glenn Richards speaking. Also on the call are Andy Port, our planning director, and Caitlin Sullivan, one of the city planners, and Gretchen Joy, the minute taker. The commissioners who are panelists in Zoom talk will have their audio enabled, but we will try to talk one at a time. If there are public hearings where public comment is invited, we will allow one member of the public at a time to be unmuted. If you wish to speak during such a time, you must raise your hand so we're aware of it and can unmute your audio. And you will also need to unmute yourself on your end. So take a look around your whatever device you've got, so you know how to do that should that come up. If you're on the phone, it's *9 to raise a hand, *6 to unmute. And I see we are joined by Malcolm Carnwath. Malcolm, looks like you might be muted on your end. So see if you can unmute yourself so we can make sure that you can hear us and we can hear you. If you can do that.
Okay, try that.
We heard you. Thank you, Malcolm. A little bit low, but we did hear you. So thanks very much. So we do have Mr. Carnwath on board with us, which is great. Okay, so that's who's here. And commissioners, a couple other notes for you guys. If you're making or seconding a motion, also do state your name if possible. That helps our note taker because she does need to note who is making motions, who's seconding, and how the votes go and so forth. And it also turns out that for Zoom meetings, votes all need to be roll call votes, which we've been doing anyway. So we'll just continue doing that. It seems to be an efficient way of doing it in any event. Okay. I think that's pretty much the preamble I need to make at this point. We have the first two items on the agenda are demolition delay applications. The first one is for 490 Merrimack Street. And this is me, Tellerman and Costa representing the client. I assume they're here. Andy, do you see a representative from that firm in the attendees?
Yes, Attorney Mead is here.
Okay, so this is kind of some of these plans, including the most revised ones, have come in quite recently. In fact, I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't even seen the most recent plans myself yet. What was originally started as a full demolition has been changed to a partial demolition and so forth. But why don't you unmute Attorney Mead, and I'll let her make a statement. I assume, Ms. Mead, my question I'll put you is, my guess is that you don't want to continue, but you'd like to get started on this. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. And for the record, Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa on 30 Green Street, on behalf of the 490 Merrimack Street Realty Trust, LLC. Let me say that the revisions that you got today, which probably most people didn't look at, actually are nothing substantive. They were correcting some errors or things that were unclear in the plans. So I would understand that the board would want to continue this, but I would like to start with the presentation because I think it's important that that we show that, in fact, it did start as an original full demolition.
Mhm.
And we have revised that to a partial demolition. So I would like to get started on that if that would be okay with the chair.
Yeah, yes, that's okay with the chair. I thought,
Great.
and we'll see. We may have to continue it. We'll have to see how it goes. But I thought it would probably serve both our interests to at least get started on it.
Great, thank you very much. That was my thought as well. This property is at 490 Merrimack Street, and my client, one of the principals of the trust, grew up here in Newburyport, moved away, had children, and has moved back, hoping to raise her family here in town. We, as I noted earlier, originally filed for a full demolition permit. After a lot of discussion with the architect and with the neighbors and further consideration, what the applicant is now proposing to do is to save most of the original structure and provide an adaptive reuse of that structure while still being able to build a home which would be appropriate for a growing family. Next, please. So and I might remind the commission, some of you were on the commission at the time, some of you weren't. The proposal is actually similar to what the commission approved on Hancock Street, where there was a very small single family home, and it was adaptively reused as a garage as well. So this is not unheard of in town. In any event, this structure was originally built in and around 1890. It's a balloon frame. There's an addition and a porch that was later added in the rear. There's 994 square feet of living area with 84 square feet of porch. It has been partially demolished historic features. Some of the foundations gone. The chimney's disconnected inside the house. We have some photos of that. And there's a significant weather damage on the property. So Andy, if you can go to the next slide, please. So there's no Form B. It's not listed as contributory on the data sheets. It does show up finally in this Newburyport Assessor's Map in 1924, map 69. Next, please. We reviewed all of these maps to see if there was any map that we typically would review that has this either property or structure on it prior to 1924. And it doesn't, mostly because these maps didn't extend out to this area of Merrimack Street at those time periods. So not surprising that it's not on these maps. It's not because it wasn't there. I mean, obviously we found via the deed search that there was a structure on site. This structure, by the way, to give some kind of reference point, is across from the Christie Drive area on Merrimack Street towards the west end of Merrimack Street. Next. And here it shows up on the 1924 assessor's map. You can see 490 Merrimack Street in the front. The original structure is the broad part of the structure facing the street. Then there's that later added L, and there's some sort of structure in the back. I don't know whether it was a barn or a garage, but that no longer exists. Next. And there's a blow up of the assessor's map and a current footprint of the house from the assessor's card. Next. And this is a site plan of the existing conditions. And go ahead, you can do the next. And this gives you a better idea of the location. I think it's interesting. It's a very eclectic architectural area in the city of Newburyport. Lots of different ages and styles and types of structures, different uses. We have 2-family uses, single-family uses. So there's a lot of different things going on down here at this end of Merrimack Street. Next. So here's a picture of the front view of Merrimack Street, of the house on Merrimack Street. You can see the bushes have been allowed to grow up and really block the front of this cute little structure, notwithstanding its condition. It has been structurally compromised over the years and has significant water damage, not currently fit for human habitation. As I said earlier, next please, Andy, the chimney, while it still exists on the outside, is disconnected, and we'll show a photo of that. So here's the rear L on this and the rear back porch. This is from the back of the house. Next. And then we have the side view. Next. And then this is the opposite side coming down Merrimack Street from town. Next. And then this is across the street, looking over to the house. Next. And we had a structural engineer go in and do some work. And so these next several slides are condition slides. So obviously you can see the wood rod on the exterior. Next. This is the chimney, which is got all kinds of supports. And as I'm going to show you in a little bit, is not connected on the inside. Next. And you've got, the foundation and the brick separating and deteriorating. Next. And here again, the deterioration on the brick foundation and on the north foundation. Next. And there we got an exterior uncovered area allowing water to get into the basement. Next. And this is the moisture intrusion into the inside of the home. Next. And here we have the antiquated timber framing in the basement, much of which is below grade. And you can see that the foundation walls are also deteriorating. Next. And here's another part of the foundation that was partially demolished to allow the addition. Not very tactfully, I might add. Next. And here we go. You can see the framing, but you can also see where the chimney has been demolished and abandoned in the attic. Next.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Mead, but
That's right.
that leaves one to wonder what is holding up the part of the chimney that's
I
outside the
don't-
roof.
Well, all those tiebacks and everything, I guess. I think I'm surprised it hasn't fallen. When I saw this photo, I was like, wow, how's that really helping it up there? So it's
All right,
not.
well, all right.
Yeah. So then here's the attic and the lack of headroom in the bedroom upstairs. Next. Ventilation beneath the roof, not necessarily in the right location. Next. Obviously the stairs up to the attic, not to code and difficult to climb. So this is the condition. And we split this into the two sections as the chair has requested we do. So the first determination the board needs to make is whether the building is historically significant and whether it should be preferably preserved. And our request is that you may find the building to be historically significant, but the portion that we're proposing to have demolished, which we'll go through in a little bit, need not be preferably preserved.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mead. Well, let me turn to my fellow board members here, and to try to keep things orderly. It's best if you raise your hand to speak, but I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners if someone has an opinion as to whether the house is historically significant and preferably preserved or not. Does anyone like to comment on that? Don't be shy. Okay, I see two hands. Mr. Morgan, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think by definition it's historically significant due to its age. I'd like to understand more of its history to understand if it's preferably preserved, because it seems like from a conditions standpoint, it's probably not. I don't see actually visibly any particular things that lend it for historical preservation consideration in terms of its material condition. There may be other historical facts that might shed a bit more light on it. Do we know anything at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Did your various researchers turn up anything, Attorney Mead, on anyone who may have lived there of note and that sort of thing?
No, nothing. And, we do a pretty good job of, we couldn't track anyone down that had of any particular name recognition, historical significance. You might recall on the 159 Water Street, we, determined that the person who had owned that had, pretty significant reputation in
Yeah.
town and was a significant landowner. None of that was evident here at all.
Okay. Mr. Fay, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, I was going to say essentially the same thing. I think due to the age, it would be historically significant, but I don't see anything, just the condition of the house.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would say
Yeah,
not
it is.
preferably preserved.
Yeah. Understood.
unfortunately.
One question I had, Attorney Mead, was that in the engineer's report, I'll have a brief quote from it here. The overall cost of recommended structural repairs noted above may exceed the cost to demolish and reconstruct the entire building. We recommend a cost to benefit analysis. So was that attempted cost benefit analysis? Of course, that might have been referring to the demolition of the whole structure, which was what was contemplated at the time back then.
Right. So, no, we didn't do one. He did not perform one because we were requesting at the time a full demolition. And, my client went out and met with the neighbors and whatnot and decided to try to do what they could to save the form of the structure, as we can talk about in a little bit. So no, that ultimately was not done.
Okay, thank you. Now, Joe, your hand is still up. Is that merely an accident? Anyone else have a comment? If not, would someone like to, I'm told that it's customary for the, well, it's not strictly necessary in these smaller meetings like this, but it's preferable that the motions not come from the chair, and that's necessary for some reason. Would someone like to make a motion that the structure in question is historically significant but not preferably preserved mostly due to condition issues, among other things?
I'll make that motion, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now Chris, your hand is up. Did you have another comment or are you good?
No, that was just a second.
Okay, then let's take a vote on that. I have my roll call order here. It's in alphabetical order. So Malcolm Conrath, look, I think you're unmuted. Your vote on that?
Yeah, I go along with the historically significant, not necessarily preserved.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Good to hear you and good to have you participating. Mr. Fay?
I agree. Yes.
Okay. Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay. Patricia Pecknick is not here yet. Mr. Ziemba, Ron?
Yes, I approve of the motion.
Okay. And the chair will approve as well. So, so we've determined that while it's historically significant, it's not preferably preserved. Would you like to share with us what your plans are for this, Attorney Mead? Or
I do. Obviously now we don't need the release of the demolition permit, but
Right.
I'm happy to go through that. So if you want to, Andy, slide down.
I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Well, so just to make sure my board understands what you just said, because I understand that. So since there's no demo delay imposed by us due to the requirement to preserve the structure, the applicant does not need, there's no demolition plan review. So they're basically free to go at this point. But if you just want to, we don't want to take a whole lot of time, Attorney Mead, but it would be nice to at least for both us and any members of the public who are interested in this, get a quick review of what you plan to do.
Sure, you should know we have to get a special permit for nonconformities from the zoning board too. So there will be another final review.
Okay.
So Andy, if you want to slide down towards the end to the architectural drawings. So the intention, could you go up? This is go down one more. So the intention is to take off the rear section of the house, including the porch, and then the back part of the roof. And then if you could go one more, Andy. And then keep intact the front section, painted wood, clapboards, redo the roof, keep the chimney in there, somehow save it, put a door on the front. This is the original front. And then on the side, as you drive eastward from the west, put that back intact as well. And then Andy, if you could go one more, I think. And then on the westbound side, you'll see there'll be 2 garage doors. And then the house will be connected to this with a breezeway. So the breezeway will be off the rear, the back of the house. So it will be separate and apart from it. But the form and structure of the house will be preserved. And the view from the street will be preserved as well. And we think it's a nice way to keep that streetscape to the extent that it exists on that side of Merrimack Street intact, as do the neighbors.
Okay. I see the existing chimney on the drawings. Are they going to keep that as well?
They are. That's why I said they're going to attempt to reconstruct that
I see.
and keep it.
Okay.
So thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Okay, you're welcome. I'm making a note here. Okay, very good. The next item is, let me make sure I'm in the right place here in my notes. Okay, we don't, yes. 2 Jackson Street. I believe there should be a Jerome James, I believe is the applicant and owner. Hopefully he's here. Andy, do you see Mr. James in the attendees?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, there you go. And your audio, we can hear you as well.
And I also have my wife here.
Hello.
Greetings and good evening. All right, let me just introduce this. This is a application for a demolition permit in the DCOD. It's a roof line change where they're adding a non-exempt dormer over an existing stair to provide access, some improved access to some existing attic rooms. The house is listed as a contributory structure. So since you're not represented by counsel, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the whole procedure. You saw in this previous one was a similar deal in that was a similar demolition delay review. The first step, we take a look at your house or structure, dwelling, whatever you want to call it, and we need to determine whether it is historically significant and preferably preserved. If it is not, then that's basically you move on to whatever your next step is. Sometimes you need other approvals from the ZBA or not, and so on. If it is preferably preserved, we go into what's called a demolition plan review, and that is a public hearing where public comment is also invited. And we hear from members of the public on that. And that's when we review what you are planning to do and can comment on that and suggest changes and so forth and so on. And until that plan is approved, there's a delay in getting the demolition permit. So does that makes you? Did you get all that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, good.
I think the one part that I would like a little more clarification on is the preferentially.
Preserved.
Yes.
Okay, the simplest way I can explain that is usually when a house is considered historically significant, most often it is also preferably preserved. I mean, after all, our whole reason we're here is to preserve Newburyport's architectural heritage.
Sure.
There are cases, as it just so happens we have an example tonight, where due to condition, other issues about the structure, it's, it just doesn't seem to come up to a high enough bar, or so to speak, to be, quote, historically significant, where we view its loss or partial or full demolition would result in a serious loss of the architectural heritage. So if it doesn't rise to that to that bar, then it can go there's no impediment to having the demolition approved, or, and your building permit approved and so on. But if it is preferably preserved because if we deem it an important part of the streetscape, it's a house that either due to its age, its condition, people who live there, all of the above, um, we want to, keep it either intact or at least approve of whatever changes you want to make. What typically happens in those cases is that the historical commission and the applicant are usually most often able to come to an agreement over the changes. Often there are relatively minor alterations or changes to the plan, and usually we end up with something that the applicant or the owner is okay with, and we're okay with, and then we're good to go. Does that help?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So would you like to tell us what you'd like to do? I see Andy's displaying part of your application here. He skipped to the part where it's an aerial photo, past the initial application and some of the, details about the lot and so on. Can
Yeah,
you?
sure. And this is Andy,
Yeah.
Chair Richards. Thank you.
Yes.
Jerome, you can suggest any particular visual that you've submitted, and I can pull that up. Typically, I'll pull up whatever's been discussed, but if you want to show anything in particular, we can go in sequence on your drawing so you can explain what the request is.
Okay, this is a good starting point. I think what I'd like this is just showing our home compared to the others that I have photos of later in the application.
Okay.
A little context. So if you wouldn't mind moving, I think maybe 2 slides down, it starts showing some of the photographs of the home.
That was your cue, Andy.
Oh, sorry, Andy. Maybe 2 slides down.
All right, there a bit of a malfunction with Zoom. It kind of froze up on me. So,
Oh, no.
Okay. Yep, you're back
No
now.
worries.
so there you go. Sorry about the delay.
So there we go. So this is we have a series of pictures, and we may not need to show all of them. This is the home from the street. This is
Right.
a right side view showing relationship to others. This is a closer view of that, showing the roof line from the right hand side. And this is the left hand side, which is where we would like to propose adding the dormer.
Correct. Okay.
The roof line, if you can see sort of the middle of the roof, there actually is a skylight. So part of why we're interested in this, that skylight is in a stairwell that leads from the second floor up to the attic. And those stairs are fairly narrow, and there's very limited headroom. So the idea was to put a dormer that makes those stairs a lot more, it eases up the headroom so that the accessibility to the 2 rooms up in the attic are easier to get to. Next slide. This is, I was attempting to show different views of the home relative to the neighbors. We have a fairly small lot, actually. Next slide, please. This is showing the left back view with across the street home. Next, please. This is another left view showing, I think, the house to the left of the one that was just shown across the street.
Right.
Next, please. This is a little further down from the left side, showing our neighbor that has a similar structure to what we're wanting to add onto our home. Next, please. This looks like a repeat, sorry.
Yeah, some of these are very good to show the context of your house in the context of the neighboring houses.
And so this is just showing the front from across the street.
Yep.
And then I think the next drawings are getting into some of the architectural drawings, and probably the elevation drawings may be most advantageous. This one is actually showing sort of the area that would be change to add the dormer. And you can see, this is from the attic view. This is showing the stairwell that comes up along the left side of the home, and it turns into the center of the home. And you can see there's 2 rooms on either side of that center hallway.
Right. Mr. James, is your architect here tonight? If we had any questions that they might be.
He is not here tonight, and
Okay.
we apologize. He had a prior commitment.
Okay.
But
All right, go ahead, keep going.
gladly attempt to answer any of the questions that you might have.
Okay.
I think probably, Indy, if you want to move down, the elevation structures are the ones that maybe give the best view. There we go. So this is probably the best one to talk to. It shows the proposed roof line from the front, which is the right view. And then the roof line changed from the left of the home, showing the dormer addition. It's a shed dormer.
Right.
The goal is to match the siding, match the trim. The roofing obviously would be the same, and to add windows that match the existing windows.
Okay. 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 Anything else you'd like to say about it?
I believe that's about it.
Okay. Do you know anything about the history of this particular house? I did note that it was listed as in the inventory of Newburyport historical structures as a contributory structure during that survey. Do you happen to know, I don't have in my notes the approximate year it was built. Do you happen to know what that is?
I believe the approximate year we were told was 1859.
Okay.
We bought the home in August of 2018.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So our first determination is as with our last one on Merrimack Street, whether this structure is historically significant and preferably preserved or not. So I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners. Would someone like to offer a comment or opinion, or if someone has a question for Mr. James, we can do that now. While I'm waiting for.
I have something.
Yep. Oh, is that Malcolm?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, go ahead, Malcolm.
I think it is historically significant, and we should try to preserve it. But I have no problem with this dormer.
Okay.
I think this is a reasonable plan, and I don't think it's the house is not necessarily a classic Georgian or any architectural period. It is a nice, handsome house, and I think it's a nice house in the neighborhood. And in fact, I sold that house back in 1983.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Mr. Carnwath used to be in the real estate business. Thank you, Malcolm. Anything else?
No, that's it. That's fine.
Okay, so it sounds, just to sum up, sounds like you're saying that it may be, yes, it's historically significant and worthy of preservation. However, I'm sure we'll get to the demolition plan review, but it sounds like you don't have any particular problem with this particular dormer addition. So we'll get to that.
Not on this house, and I think if it makes it more livable for these folks.
Right. Okay, thank you, Malcolm. And I see Ron, your hand is up. You're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Glenn. I took a ride by here on this very short street. I think it's 2 blocks or 3 blocks at most. And many of the houses had dormers or other appurtenances on their roofs, I noticed. So I'm in agreement with Malcolm that this dormer would be fine on this particular house and this particular street, because it would fit in perfectly with most of the
Yeah.
other houses on the street.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. Anyone else have a comment?
Yeah, Chair Richards, this Peter McNamee.
Okay, go ahead, Peter, and then Joe, I see your hand. We'll get to you next. Go ahead, Peter.
I also took a drive by and looked at the house and looked at the surroundings and whatnot. And while I do believe it's historically significant, preferably preserved, I'm reluctant with regards to this dormer. And I wonder if the applicant is aware of the guidelines that are in place for constructing shed dormers.
That's a good question, and I wonder if you're what Mr. James, what Mr. McNamee is referring to is that there is some standard rules by which you'd be allowed to build a dormer without having to get any kind of special permission. And your dormer is doesn't conform in a couple ways. For one thing, the roof of the dormer goes all the way up to the ridge or top of your roof of the main house, so it affects the roof line there. And it's also the face of the dormer, where the windows are on that face, is in the same plane as the wall of the house, rather than being set in a little bit more. Did you or your architect try to? I can see about the inset on the face, but especially on that peak or roof of the dormer, was there any consideration made to try to have the dormer roof not go all the way to the ridge line of the main house?
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yep.
I'm not sure of that, to be honest with you. I'm not an architect, so I'm not aware of the standards and guidelines. I would have assumed that he would have taken those into consideration. I can certainly ask that question. And we certainly want to be within all of the approved guidelines for adding this sort of a structure to our home. So I don't know that doesn't sound like a terribly hard modification to do. Is it just to bring the roof of the dormer to a lower level than the crest of the roof?
Yeah, that's the main gist. Tell you what, let's put this temporarily aside just for the minute. I want to hear what Mr. Morgan has to say about. We're still really trying to decide about the first decision as to significance and whether it's perfectly preserved or not. So we will, get to more of any design issues, whatever they may be, in just a couple of minutes. So Joe Morgan, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't have any comments about the design of the dormer. I think it's perfectly appropriate. There's an alternative design where you could do more of have a gable end on the dormer, and it would intersect the main ridge at a lower point. I think we talked about that type of dormer style before, but in general, I don't really express a preference here. I just wanted to point out, though, to the other commissioners that I believe it's this set of drawings that has structural details and drawings attached. And I think that in the context of other projects that we're seeing that do bring or that will bring forth structural comments, that this is a good set of drawings, a good set of documents to show that even a modest addition such as this dormer requires some very specific structural reinforcements and additions on the lower floors. They need to path this load, both the dead and live loads. In other words, the weight of the dormer plus any additional snow loads. They need to path that structure back down to the foundation. And you will see that in the lower plans, you will see some additional posts or interior posts that are added in order to accommodate this. And and the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because anytime that these additions are made, it will have impacts on lower levels, and the structural engineer and the structural drawings are important to understand how it works. Okay, so that's all I have to say. It's just really an informational note, and I'd like for the chair to take note that I have lowered my hand this time.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. And
Okay.
thank you for also mentioning those drawings. You know, I did notice those structural drawings and noticed, you know, comments about posts extending down to the sill and this and that, you know, through lower floors and all of that. And there was a comment someplace about if a certain, it was either a rafter or maybe the ridge pole, if it turned out to be less than 2 by 12, it would be either sistered or replaced, whatever. So there was extensive discussion of the type you're mentioning, and I completely agree. I think we've been, well, let's say we're coming up the learning curve. Let's just put it that way. Of, you know, getting that information and examining it carefully so that we're you know, we don't have the kinds of surprises that we've sometimes run into in other cases that we want to avoid. So thank you very much, Joe, for that. So, all right. So sounds like I don't want to. I think we are ready for a motion as to whether it's historically significant and preferably preserved. It sounds like the board is leaning towards that position, and even though you know, they don't have a big, doesn't sound like there's going to be a whole lot of opposition to the plan, but we'll get to that. So if I'm correct in that, would someone care to make such a motion? Please.
I'll move that the property is historically significant and preferably preserved. This is Peter McNamee.
Thank you very much, Peter. Is there a second?
Second.
That's Ron. Okay, it sounded like Ron. Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. I'll go through my roll call, starting with Malcolm again. Let's see, you still with us, Malcolm? Yep, you are.
I agree.
Okay, you're a yes. Okay, Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, Patricia is not yet with us. Mr. Ziemba, Ron.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair will also vote yes. So that motion carries, and we move to the demolition plan review. I'm trying to, you know, I've been looking at so many plans, I can't remember. Well, yeah, there was demolition plans with this. I think he was, in fact, the page we're looking at right now, he kind of showed, well, this shows the proposed, but the dotted lines indicate, you know, the area. I think, Andy, I think there were some prior drawings that were specifically, you know, showed the demolition area. But the demolition plan per se isn't just what's being demolished, but it's also what's being built in its place. So I heard most of the commission express yeah, thanks, Andy. This is a good one. So the box with the big X, that's the area of the roof that needs to be removed. And it's also, if you look, there's a sort of a rounded rectangular shape that shows disturbance to the ridge that needs to be made in order to do, right, thanks, Sandy, to do this, which obviously will be covered back up once the construction is complete. So let me direct my comments to Commissioner. Well, actually, before I do that, why don't this is a public hearing, and public comment is a part of such a public hearing. So before we further deliberate, I think it's appropriate that I see if there are members of the public in attendance that would like to comment. So I will open the public comment portion of the meeting at this point. So Andy, do we have public comment?
We do. First person is Stephanie Nikitich.
Okay, Ms. Nikitish, you should be unmuted, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephanie Nikitich, 93 High Street. I had the same question that Commissioner McNamee had about whether or not the applicant or his architect even realized what the what the rules and guidelines for dormers on historic buildings are in Newburyport. And he said he's not sure that he did. So I think it's important maybe that he go back with his architect and look at the guidelines and look at the exempt dormers under demo delay. So things that would have made this exempt from your review. And then I hope that if he does that, he will consider from the guidelines the city has adopted a gable roofed dormer because it is much more appropriate for his building. And he sounds like he really does want to do right by that building. And I hope all the commissioners understand when they say they don't mind a design that's not exempt, but they understand that the rules you have and the guidelines are the result of quite a bit of work by the city council. So as a member of the public, I hope that you're familiar with them and you understand that a lot of work went into into trying to make sure that dormers on historic buildings in Newburyport are as appropriate as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak on our behalf?
Yeah, you will be given an opportunity in just a minute. So make a note of what you'd like to, if you have a comment in reply to anything that's said, just make a note of it. And when the public comment is over, you will have an opportunity to, you know, either reply, rebut, or say whatever it is you'd like to say. Okay, Mr. James?
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'd like to recognize, looks like Tom K has a hand up.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Sounds like Mr. Coulter-John.
Yeah, Tom Coulter-John, 64 Federal Street, co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. I would simply like to reinforce Stephanie's comments, and I think the applicant should be given the opportunity to continue this hearing, and so that he and his architect can go over those guidelines for dormers. I think it's very important. I don't object to a small dormer that's appropriate, but they should follow the guidelines. A lot of work did go into that. And I do have one question, and perhaps it's unnecessary, but the question was the type of roof that's on the building. I did not get an opportunity to today to go over and look at the building, as I often do. But when I looked at the photographs, it appeared to be a slate roof. And I don't know if I'm just poor eyesight or not, but that's just a question. And obviously, if it's slate, it's a consideration for you during your deliberations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And looks like I'm not seeing any other hands in the attendees. I just see Mr. James's hand. So I'll give one last call out if anyone from the public has a comment on this particular matter. If not, I'll recognize Mr. James, who wanted to say a couple things in reply. Looks like I'm not seeing any. So Mr. James, did you want to, you had a couple things you wanted to say?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So in the guidelines, and I think the lady was Stephanie.
Yes.
There was, are there shed dormers in the guidelines?
Yes.
Do they, okay, so there is the ability to do a shed dormer. It just needs to maybe be adjusted a little differently than what we have.
I think in your case, I think there's two areas where you're not conforming that I'm aware of at the top of my head. The one is that I mentioned, it's the roof of the dormer should not meet the ridge line of the main house. Right there. Andy has driven that red box around it there. It should be
Yeah.
a little bit lower. That's one area. And the other area is the face of the dormer is not, should be set back in from the plane of that wall. You see how you can see that the face where the windows are in the dormer
Sure.
is exactly in a line with the wall below it. It looks, you know, on the roof, on the part of the drawing that's on the left-hand side, it looks like it's set back a little bit because the eave does project out a little bit. Now that
Right.
may be harder for you to achieve because it looks like your stairway inside is quite close to that exterior wall. So that, and we've had these come up before with that exact problem. But
Yeah, I anticipate that would be a problem because
yes, but we can look
areas
at,
right against the wall.
yeah, but yeah, but so I think that may be an issue, but I do think this merits consideration. You know, that suggestion is actually something that I was thinking already myself, that it would be worthwhile getting back together with the architect to see if some of those things could be amended. And if you, we can also either, you know, the planning board staff can point you to where those dormer guidelines are available. They're not terribly complicated, so that's but they do have the benefit that they're designed to ensure that dormers are going to have the least negative impact on not only the house itself but also on, you know, the neighborhood by not looking like they're out of place. So now turning back to my fellow board members, you heard from the public, you've heard from Mr. James. Does anyone have any other comment they'd like to make on the plans themselves? Go ahead, Ron. I see your hand went up.
Yes, I came out in favor of the dormer on this particular house, on this particular street. And I do agree that if the standard guidelines can be observed here, that's all to the good.
Right.
And it sounds to me like the owner may be willing to consider some modifications that would bring the dormer into conformity. But I just didn't want to lose this dormer because sometimes we have trouble with dormers on this commission. I think sometimes.
Yeah.
And, didn't want to lose the case. That's all.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Ron. Okay, your hand is still up, by the way. Anyone else on the commission have a comment, question, anything? Christopher Fay, you are recognized.
Yeah, I'm the guy who has problems with the dormers. So I would just like to point out a couple things. And I don't know if Andy can go up to maybe the last photograph above, maybe a couple slides up. It looks like number 20. The comment was made by the owner as well as some members of the commission that the dormer would seem appropriate. But I just want to point out the house to our left, okay, which appears to have this sort of beige brown house, right?
Yep.
Which appears to have what could be called either a massive dormer or just an extension or an addition to this house that was done who knows when.
Yeah.
That looks way out of place. It looks way out of place architecturally, and I'm a lay person. I'm not an architect. It just looks out of place architecturally. Yeah. It definitely doesn't fit with Newburyport. Yeah. I've been up and down this street as well a number of times, and this to me looks like it's let's call it an up and coming street. And there are a lot of different houses on here. Some smaller houses, if I'm remembering correctly, that I would anticipate would come back to this commission in the coming years saying, we would like to do what our neighbor's done. And just because the neighbors have done it doesn't make it right. Because we can see all throughout the city places where people did things because they got the go ahead to do it for whatever reasons. And it doesn't mean that that's the purview of this particular commission, in my opinion. Our job is to make sure that the historical integrity of these homes is kept in place, not to allow it so that people can have more living space. Just my opinion. The other thing I'd like to add is that as I walked down High Street and we had looked at the church there, the sort of Greek temple church, right? And it looks like the dormer has already gone on there, unless I missed something.
Yep,
And
it has.
We were assured that this would be unobtrusive. You can clearly see it from the street. All you got to do is kind of tilt your head a certain way, and it doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good, and there's no going back from that. Okay. So while this is not High Street, that's understandable, and there is a lot of different styles here. I don't imagine that this house is going to look like its neighbor here to the left, but I wouldn't want to go down that road. I just think it's a slippery slope. So I'm in favor of maybe going back to the drawing board for the owners and the architect to address some of the issues. But me personally, I wouldn't support the dormer. I'll be the fly in the ointment.
Would you, okay, if it was more in line with the guidelines, would that be helpful?
I think that's at least the minimum that needs to be done.
Okay.
And I'd have to reassess. But
Okay.
as it
All right.
stands now, no.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Peter, I see you've raised a hand. You're recognized.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of echo a few things. Going back to what Commissioner Ziemba was saying, that we would like to make these additions or these dormers conform to the living needs of the house, and there will be a challenge, a space challenge associated with adjusting this dormer to meet the guidelines, because that staircase is so narrow and is right up against the sidewall of the house. So I recognize that, and that does present a difficulty. However, I'm going to echo what Stephanie Niketich said, that a lot of work went into putting the guidelines together for a reason. We are supposed to be safeguarding the architectural integrity of the city, and we're supposed to be doing it. The only way to do it most of the time is in dribs and drabs. So this is one dormer, and it's easy to say, well, because of the size of the house, because of the need of the owner, all both legitimate issues, we should allow this. But that's going to be the case in many, if not most, of these applications. So, and actually, Commissioner Fay just reminded me also, when we did review the application for the church on High Street, I was in favor of that shed dormer because I thought it was a matter of practical significance. And I completely agree with him. I noticed that this weekend I was driving along and I happened to glance over to my left as I was heading east on High Street, and there it was. And that's not how I pictured it. So I sort of rue that decision, voting in favor of that dormer. So I would recommend that the owner go back to his architect and A, make sure the architect was aware of the guidelines, and B, seriously consider what, I can't remember who was suggested it, making a doghouse dormer or some other more appropriate architectural improvement to give them that room to get upstairs. And it isn't going to be easy. I recognize that, but by the same token, we have these guidelines in place, and it is up to us to protect the architectural integrity of the city.
Right. And I see Mr. Port, our planning director, and Mr. James, if you're looking at the video, you can see what he's done is he's gone to the ordinances and highlighted the description of the an exempt dormer. By an exempt dormer, it means it's a dormer that does not require review because it meets certain design requirements that have already been determined to result in dormers that will not have a strongly deleterious effect on the structure. So thank you for doing that, Andy. Well, I think from what I'm hearing, and I'm seeing the hands for us, I think it sounds like we are ready for a potential motion to go ahead and impose a demolition delay, during which time and encourage the owner to work with his architect on seeing if they can come up with a better design, a more conforming design for the dormer that we can all get along with. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Someone like to make a motion to that effect? Want me to restate it? Okay. I'm proposing a motion that we impose the demo delay, and encourage the owner to work with his architect to come back to the historical commission with some revised plans where they to see with hopefully a dormer that is either in conformance or more closely in conformance with the guidelines in the ordinance for an exempt dormer. Actually, probably if they come up with something that's totally conforming with the exempt, then they should be good to go in any event. So, sorry, that was a little wordy for a motion, but does someone want to restate it more cleanly, or do you think that's good enough?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to make a motion that we impose the demolition delay and encourage the owner to come back with revised plans for the dormer.
Okay, sounds clean. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that sounded like Mr. McNamee.
Yes, sorry.
It's all right. 1 second. Okay, Mr. Carnwath, your vote on that?
I'm good with that.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, skipping Ms. Picnic. Mr. Ziemba?
Yes.
Okay, and Chair will be a yes too. And Mr. James, let me explain to you what that means. Under the ordinance, this demolition delay is a 1-year delay on any, getting a demo permit to do this work. Doesn't mean that you're forever forbidden to do it. Well, and the reason I went ahead and suggested we impose that now is because that way, it's usually actually in your benefit to kind of start the clock on that. But what typically happens in these cases is you can go back, get together with your architect, go over those exempt dormer regulations that Mr. Port has shown you. If you have any questions, the people in the planning office will be happy to guide you as to what you need to look at and so on. And and I hope that we can, that we'll see you again in the not too distant future with a plan that we can both live with.
Thank you. We'll go back and look at our options and come back to you. I hope that we will be able to get this dormer built.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly want to meet any guidelines in the town because we enjoy living here, and the historical significance of the town is part of why we enjoy it. But we also
Absolutely.
to make our home more livable. So
yep. Well, I think the chances are good we can reach that compromise. At least, well, call me optimistic. I am, I guess. But what you just said is very much on point, Mr. James. That's exactly kind of why we're here. We know that people move here, they visit here because of the charm of this city, and that's what we're trying to hang on to. Within reason, we try not to be too, well, whatever. I'll stop there. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. James.
Can I ask one last question before we leave?
Yeah,
The last question is, so you talked about a year waiver. That doesn't mean that we have to wait a year before we can do any work.
oh, no, no, no. Well, it doesn't, well, what it means is that starting today, there's a year, if you do nothing else, you won't get a permit to do this work for a year. However, you can come back at our next meeting if you're ready that soon. I think it's December 12th, if I'm not mistaken. And if you have a revised plan you'd like to go over, you don't have to wait a year for that. No.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sure. And in fact, that's what usually happens. Usually within 1 or 2 meetings, we get it resolved. Okay, we have some other business here, so let's get on with it. 3 Hancock Street, I believe this is another MTC project. Ms. Mead, are you representing the applicant on this one again?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
And
just
with
give me, hang on just a second here. Let me just see if I had any comments to make to kick it off. Just to refresh the memory of the board, there was a demo delay imposed the last meeting. The applicant has gone back and has some revised plans, which I'm sure they're about to tell us about. Some things they discovered and have revised. And I should also point out to the board that the applicant was before the ZBA Tuesday of this week and was granted the permit they needed for what's called an upward extension of an existing nonconformity. So what that means is that besides they needed a permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals to extend upward a nonconforming condition that was already existing, and they did get that. So the ball is now back in our court to review these revised plans, which I'm sure we're about to hear about, and decide whether or not to give them our blessing. So with that, Attorney Mead, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Lisa Mead, Teller Acosta, 30 Green Street in Newburyport. And with me this evening is Scott Brown. Next.
Thank you. Is that the architect?
Yes. And we're here on behalf of James Bort Construction. Next, please, Andy. So as the chair just said, and I won't dwell on this, at the October 8th meeting, the board determined this to be historically significant and preferably preserved. And we had some discussion relative to how we would undertake the work that we had proposed to essentially raise the ridge line backwards 20 inches and then raise the back of the roof. After that hearing, Mr. Brown realized that his existing conditions were a little off when we compared them to the photographs, and he went out to the site, and the chimney is actually located in front of the ridge and not on it. And so the ridge can be raised, the roof can be raised to the rear of the ridge without affecting the existing chimney. So if you can go to the next slide. And so, Andy, you can go one more because I've already said that. So just as a reminder, the house was built in around 1800. It's 2,150 square feet. It's in the R2 zoning district, DCOD. Most of the second floor has head height of 6.6 feet, but some of it has a smaller head height. Next. And here are the existing conditions, the house photographs and the streetscape. Next.
Attorney Mead, sorry to interrupt you. On slide 4, you said 6.6 feet.
Yeah, 6 feet 6 inches. Sorry.
Okay.
6 feet 6 inches.
Right, thank you.
Thank you for that. That's so here is the side views of the structure. And then this is interesting. The chimney that is on the roof, as you can see, has been closed off inside the house. And Scott may want to talk about that a little bit more. And so I'm just going to turn it over to him because the next slides start to have his plans.
Great. Well, thank you, Lisa. Andy, if you could just turn to the proposed elevations for me, please. Next sheet. Excellent. So Scott Brown, the architect for the project. So as we were discussing the merits of this application at the last hearing, I realized to my dismay that our existing condition drawings had the chimney in the incorrect location. And as Lisa's already stated, we were showing it straddling the existing ridge, when in fact it does not do that. It clearly sits on one side of the ridge. So we were originally proposing to take down and rebuild the chimney, not because it's in terrible shape or that we were planning to discontinue its use, but because I thought its location relative to the ridge was important to the character of the house. So I am happy to report that this new revised proposal before you tonight does not touch the chimney at all. And other than the chimney, we've made no other changes to these drawings. So if you could remember in the last hearing, we did look at some earlier options that we had studied. We did discuss the merits or lack of merit of some of those. We have decided to stick with our original preferred option, which is this before you. And we decided to stick with this because it maintains the proportional relationship of the lower slope roof to the smaller, steeper pitch roof on the back of the house. So this left side elevation that you're looking at, it's pretty prominent. It's the first thing that you see when you turn down onto Hancock off of Bromfield. And I really think that some of those other options that we did discuss at length at the last hearing, I do think that they negatively change the character of the house. And I think that this proposal before you tonight keeps the character of the house intact. And finally, Andy, if you just go to page 7. There's this. So I thought, at the last hearing, there were some questions about, what is the current use of the chimney? What does it serve? And this, this is what it currently is. This is I can't quite take credit for this marvelous piece of design, but hopefully at some point we can make something nice of this and turn it into a nice operable chimney. And with that, providing that council has nothing further to add, we'll open it up for discussion.
Okay, just one clarifying question. Has anyone examined, or have you had a mason examine the chimney overall to determine if it is suitable to be, used, like open this back up for use as a fireplace or anything like that?
No, that would require, that's a good question. That would require some demolition, and we haven't done any demolition in the house. And actually what you're seeing here is, if you could look a little closer, the back of that fireplace is actually a linoleum panel meant to look like brick. And you can even sort of see on the sides there, it doesn't even, the coursing, so to speak, doesn't match up. So anyways, so at some point, we'll peel this away and we'll take a look at that. At what's there, and like I said, hopefully we can turn it into a nice sort of working fireplace.
Okay. All right. I'm thinking if a public hearing is not technically required here, but I think I'm willing to allow very brief public comment if there is any. If you do have a public comment on this, I ask that you try to keep it concise. Raise your hand if you do, and we'll allow a brief period of that in case someone would like to weigh in on this. If not, then we'll go ahead and come back to the board for deliberation on this. And looks like I do see a hand. Mr. Coulter-John, I believe you've been unmuted, so the chair recognizes you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, yes.
Tom Coulter-John, 64 Federal Street, co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. Anytime you can save a historic chimney, it's wonderful. So please save this one.
Okay, it's hard. So it sounds like you're saying that, well, I'm not sure. So any comment on the rest of the plan as far as the roof line, or it sounds like you...
I can certainly live with a changed roof line, especially since the chimney is going to be preserved.
Okay, yes, and I do know that, I do remember at the first meeting, the chimney was a very hot topic. So thank you very much, Tom, for your comments. Uh, Thank you. Anyone else have a comment? I'll give it a couple seconds while I take some notes here. Not seeing any. Okay, so I'll close the public comment period. Thank you, and turn back to the board. Anyone have a question? And I see a hand has gone up. Mr. Morgan, you're recognized.
Thank you. I would like to pick up where Peter McNamee left off last time. He raised the point about the side elevations and the fenestration. And I believe the presentation here is really very misleading. I don't think it's really about the change of the ridge line at all. Sure, you're raising the ridge in the Y direction, but you're also pushing it back in the X direction. In other words, toward the rear. So what you're doing is you're setting up a new, and what the architect has tried to do is set up a new symmetry about that new ridge line as it's pushed back. And in so doing, all of the window openings are relocated. They're all new. So technically, these are actually demolition areas that should be calculated and presented to us. But he has also expanded each opening. Now, if you look at the Secretary of the Interior standards, which, okay, arguably, probably people could say they don't literally apply in the DCOD, but regardless, it's an intent. And they say that relocation of existing fenestration and the changes in sizes of existing windows and historical structures that are to be preserved or rehabilitated is to be discouraged. And so I feel that the discussion here really isn't about the ridgeline. I think that you could get some additional head height at the rear of the building. If you in fact were to extend the walls upward, you would achieve that. But what you've done here really, what the real impact of this project is to completely change the historical character of the rear elevations, as well as the front elevations. Those window openings have also been enlarged. So I think that I think the discussion really needs to start from zero again. I can't really support this at all relative to the intent of the preservation standards. This just does not fit for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. You know, I have to confess, I'd have to look at that again to see if those, looking at what's on the screen right now, you can see that the window placement is where you would expect the windows to be for the new roof line, but obviously not where you'd expect them to be for the existing one. I don't know, is there an existing elevation, Andy, that we could compare this to?
Yeah, let me pull that up.
Okay. Oh, yes, I see what you mean. So there weren't even it was a much narrower main body there of the, under that looks like the windows are pretty much aligned under the ridge. I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, your hand is still up, Joe. Were you done or?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Well, you've definitely given us food for thought there. Other members of the commission want to comment there? Or Mr. McNamee? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to unwind what I said at the last meeting, because it is a pretty stark change, and it remains a stark change, the change to the fenestration. But I do have to say I'm in favor of the treatment that is being made of the front entryway and the symmetry that's being brought to, I mean, there was symmetry there before, but the front facade of the building was very plain, and with the smaller windows which were not necessarily lined up, if this drawing is accurate, which maybe it's not since the chimney was so far off. So the changes that are being made to this building, raising the roof and bringing that ridge line up, leaving the chimney in place, does make the building more usable. It does present them an opportunity to change the fenestration in the front and that entryway. And I think they did a good job there to the good of the property and the integrity of the design. On the side of the building, I'm less excited about changing the fenestration. The old fenestration is a little eccentric, and there, I think, because that roof line is so eccentric in itself, I think that adds to the property. Now the question is, what are the appropriate windows for this property? Would they have been 6/6s, or would they have been the 2/1s that we're seeing on the side elevation existing? I don't know, but so I recognize I'm sending conflicting signals here. I like the design changes to the front, and I recognize that Commissioner Morgan's points are well taken. He's absolutely right. The fenestration has changed on both elevations. I'm in favor of what I see on the front of the building. I'm not as excited about what I'm seeing on the left elevation. I prefer the old fenestration there.
Thank you, Peter. So, actually, one quick question for you, Peter. This view we're looking at now, this is the side elevation, and it looks like the architect has tried to align the windows so that they would work with the the new roof line. But it sounds like, if I heard you correctly, that it's not working for you. Put it that way. It doesn't. Something seems off about it.
Well, it's not, because it seems such a stark change. So if you compare the existing elevation to the proposed, you'll notice, just take those two windows toward the street, the closest to the street. They line up roughly behind the center line of the chimney.
Right.
Now in the new elevation, they line up roughly in front of that center line. And I understand the reason for that. He's trying to introduce some symmetry there. But I don't like it. It seems to take something away from the implied heritage of this building.
Okay, so would you say, would I be right to say that it sounds like you're saying that this proposed design doesn't comport very well with the Secretary of Interior standards in terms of trying to, preservation standards?
Can I have a question?
I couldn't tell who was speaking.
No, it's Malcolm.
Oh, sure, Malcolm, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered, do you have photographs of the existing building as they are now from the front and from the left side? We could see that. I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, or I wasn't able to catch it. So I want to get up to speed because I think this is an extremely important piece of American historical architecture. It's a vernacular federal from 1800, and the population of the United States when this building was built was probably 5% of what it is today. So they're very rare and extremely important in my eyes. And I was also going to ask, is there a chimney arch in the basement that supports the chimney going up through the house? I mean, I wish I knew what that looked like.
Okay, well, hopefully you can see the street view now, Malcolm. Yeah. Okay, And that side is kind of obscured by the tree there.
Right.
In the drawing, elevation drawings, you can see that there are two windows that are lined up with the ridge, one over the other. And then, if I recall, another window further back, and what was probably a slightly later L that was put on the back, or not. Yeah, you can see it a bit here. You can see the windows in the back.
Yeah.
Um,
So basically,
yeah.
the front is in terms of where the windows are and the door are pretty much exactly the same as what's there now.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you say?
Yes, with the exception of, as Mr. Morgan pointed out, that they've been enlarged and the windows are being replaced with something that's more historically in keeping. These 2/1s that are there now are, I would say are, without fear of contradiction, are replacements from some point in time. And it originally probably would have been 6/6 for that size.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Scott Brown, the architect for the project.
Yeah, I was going to invite you, Mr. Brown, to make comment on this. There was a question about the arch and other things. So yes, I was going to ask if you had any comment on this stuff.
These are replacement windows.
Yes.
Albeit very old replacement windows. But what originally, don't forget, this is an early 19th century building. So what would have been on that building was 6/6 windows, and that's what we're proposing to put back. I could be wrong about this, but in the early 19th century, they didn't make glass as big as we're seeing there. So, we're really trying to return it to what it once was, originally was.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I just said.
And I firmly believe that once we get in here and start to open up the walls, I think what we're going to find is that the original rough openings for those windows are much larger than we're seeing there. So I really think that in my proposal, I have the size of those windows correct. Mm-hmm. The other issue that we're going to have to deal with is that even if, it's one of bedroom egress, so these windows, if we were to replace these windows with something new, they would not meet bedroom egress requirements for the building code. So we would have to carefully navigate that. And so the new windows that I'm proposing, which I believe are consistent with, what we would have found, do meet those egress requirements. Not only do they do that, but I think they look good relative to what we have there.
Yeah, Mr. Brown, are there any sometimes in the back or other parts of the house there are windows that have not been replaced? Are there any like that, or are they pretty much all been replaced?
Yes, if you could look at my existing condition elevations, which are accurate, you can see that all of the windows, there are no original 6/6 windows in the structure.
Okay, all right. And just eyeballing this particular image from Google there, Street View, I imagine is what that is. It looks, just me eyeballing it, it looks like the proportions of the windows, they don't look early 19th century to me. They look too wide and not, they look like they should be taller and narrower. Is that what you're thinking as well?
Yes.
Any comment on the question about the arch in the cellar for the chimney structure?
Well, honestly, I've not been down in the basement. I believe it to be a little bit of a crawl space and not a full basement.
I see.
So I don't believe that arch is there.
Right. Okay. There's some other, just some kind of basic foundation for the chimney masonry. Okay.
So as far as the left side, if we could go back to the proposed elevations, as far as the left side is concerned, I am open certainly to suggestions in terms of how we could modify that so that the majority of the board is sort of happy with the design here. I do not feel strongly about this sort of symmetry that I've created here. And I think if the board feels that these windows, ought to be aligned with the ridge, as they currently are, would be happy to make that change.
Yeah, yeah. It's a tough one because you know, if I could sum up Mr. Morgan's comments with one phrase that I believe he used, this is you've kind of expanded the envelope, and as a result, it's kind of resulted in, I don't know how to explain it. It has changed the character a bit, because like in the old proportion, like if you look at the red line here with the existing roof line, because you got that front section, it had just the two windows, because obviously it was a smaller structure. There was probably just one room per side of the central entry, and now there probably still is one room, or maybe it's going to be open plan. I don't know what the interior is going to be offhand, but but now that the side is wider, the two windows sort of look appropriate. But I don't know, when you give it the sort of the squinty test, it's something that just, I don't know, looks a bit odd. But I don't, I'm not sure where to stay on it. I can't think of anything other to do than see where the commission as a whole stands by taking a vote. Now, Peter, I see your hand is up. Did you want to make another comment, or is that just a remnant?
No, it's not a remnant. Just another comment. This elevation that we're looking at right now,
Yep.
With its symmetry, I think I've identified what I was wrestling with a few minutes ago. It just looks so plain and uninteresting. And the house, as Malcolm is saying, is something of a treasure. It's kind of a hidden treasure all the same, but it's a treasure. And to have something as plain and I don't know, dull as this symmetry doesn't do the building any favors. So I maintain, actually, I still like the size of the windows, and I agree with the architect that I think that we would probably find that that's the original rough openings, or close to it on the facade, and therefore could be carried around to the sides. But I would prefer to see the old placement of windows. And I recognize when I say that there's going to be some oddity associated with that, because they're going to now be that much farther from the roof line. But there's something much more interesting about that existing fenestration than this.
And I see Mr. Fay's hand came up, so I'll give you a chance to comment, Christopher.
Yeah, my microphone's on, good. So I guess it comes down to this side. When I look at, if we go back to the fireplace for a second,
Mm-hmm.
the fireplace to me is a metaphor for the house. It's screaming like, save me.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. It's screaming what?
Save me.
Like,
is that glass? Are those glass shells?
Yeah, I think so.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. So you've got, so I agree with Peter. I think the front looks like a million times better. And it's asymmetrical, which is how I've been going back and forth here. The windows are asymmetrical. They look much more like I think they should look like. And even the side that we're sort of debating over here, the left side, I like the windows. I like the way that they're done, because it just looks like between the railing in the front and the overhang and everything that may, again, have been done. So this is another good example of what gets done to a house if nobody says, well, wait a minute, let's slow down here. So maybe that's right in line with the previous comments about the symmetry of the left-hand elevation. The only thing but I'm okay with that. And I think that if the majority of the board says we need to return those windows on the left side to something that's a little bit more interesting, as Peter said, I have no problem with that. The one place I would have an issue, I think, aside from the fireplace, obviously, is the back. And I know it's the back, and it's just one of those things where there are two glass doors in the back. Is that what's being proposed?
Looks like, yeah, sliding patio door type things.
So I would just maybe beg to not make that same mistake. I know that sliders are convenient. I know that they're very 70s and 80s. I've lived in houses with sliders, and I would say that again, they don't belong in a house. If they had wanted to put sliding glass doors in 1802, they would have put sliding glass doors in. I'm sure they would have. So
Right.
that would be my only problem. I'm okay with the proposed windows. I think they look good on the left-hand side, but I have no problem with if other people want to move them. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Yeah,
But let's
Mr. Fay,
keep
just
that
to
fireplace.
stop around, just to comment on those sliding,
Yep.
Glass sliding doors. If those were at all visible from a public way,
Yep.
I would never propose those on a house like this. But the backyard here is very, very private and really cannot be seen from a street.
That part I understand. I always think about the,
Yes,
the
I
house.
understand the whole thing.
Yeah. And just to be clear on one thing, Chris, when you said the fireplace is screaming, "Save me," were you being sort of sarcastic in the sense of "save me from this horrible fate I've suffered," or?
Well, no, in the sense that, I mean, yeah, a little sarcastic, but in a sense that there's parts of the house. What it looks like to me, again, from a layperson's perspective, is Scott's attempting to restore the house to what we might imagine it once looked like before somebody put what appears to be a metal overhang in the front of the house with 2 wrought iron railings and that sort of thing, And you see houses like this all throughout town where nobody ever touched them. So I have to imagine I don't know who did. I don't know if you should take pictures of that fireplace to say to students, don't do this, because I don't know where you would put that. That's a Frankenstein. And to me, it's a metaphor for the house and what's been done over the years. So
Yeah.
I think the drawings and the proposal is an improvement on what exists.
Yeah, that's the impression I'm sort of sitting here getting, because I want to wrap this up if we can. But my overall impression is that if I kind of threw all your comments into a pot and stirred it around, is that there's definitely progress here, but some things seems not quite right. But we need to give this applicant some direction here as to specifically if there's something that's, well, either it's okay and we're going to approve it, or if not, what exactly it is we need to change. So why don't the only way I can figure to do that is to I'll propose a motion, and you can vote it up or down, that these plans proposed are okay. But if you don't, that doesn't mean there's no pressure to say yes or no. If you definitely think they're not quite there yet, then you can vote it down. And Malcolm, I'm going to have to, I think you're going to have to be recused from this particular vote because you weren't here when this whole thing started. But you're welcome to, your comments and observations are still welcome. But I think the various, I think it would be in keeping with the various procedural whatever to not have you vote on this particular matter because you weren't here for the whole thing. So sorry about that. So,
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yes. Who's speaking?
It's Peter McNamee,
Oh,
sorry.
hi, Peter. Yeah.
Is it appropriate, and maybe this may be a question for Andy Port, but is it appropriate to take these votes in pieces? For instance, can we have just a motion and a vote on whether or not we approve of the fenestration overall, and then move on to the larger project from there?
Well, if I understand your question, I think what you might be getting at is, does it make sense to break down the components of the commission's thoughts or concerns on the project so that you can distinguish whether folks agree or disagree with the roof line versus the windows, for instance?
Yes, I mean, what I'm thinking is I've said a lot about the fenestration, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to lose a great deal of sleep if things float as they are. So I think let's see what people think of the different components of this design. Not every single component, obviously. We're not going to break down every single elevation.
So if I understand, Yeah, if I understand it correctly, it sounds like you might be talking about instead of an advisory opinion or a memo, that would speak to that effect or a direction to the applicant, it might be there's consensus from the commission in one way on the roof line, but perhaps a different way on the windows. Is that what you're thinking, as opposed to trying to come to consensus over every aspect of this
Well,
project?
and Peter, just so I'll be clear, what I was thinking was that if we don't have a majority in favor of the plan, we would then we would have provide the applicant with the specific areas that we're not happy with, so that they could see what they could do about those. That was the alternative that I had in mind. I guess I can go either way. I mean, Andy, what do you think? Is there I don't see that there's any. I'm not sure if either of those methods is superior or inferior to the other. As long as
I guess at the end of the day, what I think, I won't speak for the applicant, but I imagine what matters most to the applicant is which, in any combination of adjustments, ones that are reasonably accomplishable, which of those adjustments are necessary to satisfy the commission. So if whatever consensus that is on any of these issues, I think it'd be helpful to the applicant to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes. Ms. Mead, yes.
Thank you. So I might just politely remind the commission that this is actually a vote, not a consensus, whichever you come down to, because it releases the thing from the House from delay.
Yep, I understand.
I would ask the chair to do the overall vote. This applicant has been very conservative, although I understand that this is a big change with this project, because in the DCOD, they would have a right not to come to this commission at all and to put an addition on the back and attempt to get the living space and a height that they need, which does not exist in this house. And so I'd like to hear kind of the vote overall, and then obviously if that doesn't pass, then hear specifically, I think particularly to this left side, maybe what the commission was thinking. So
yeah, you don't have to re-argue your case, Attorney Mead. That's kind of what I was thinking too. I think that is best for both the applicant and the commission. See if the motion passes, and if not, give you specific information as to why not. I see a hand went up from Mr. Morgan. Did you need to make a comment, Joe?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would just like to remind everyone that, the discussion that we've been having for the last 20 minutes plus is having to do with architectural design. Every commissioner has spoken about their preferences for various design elements. And I think Mr. Brown is quite capable of designing the building. I think we're here to talk about what historical features, characteristic features of the building are to be preserved in Mr. Brown's redesign.
Right.
I believe that the relocation of the windows and their resizing, that may be true that the rough openings are as depicted, but of course that would need some field study, and I would expect that to occur before all of the windows get resized and rearranged. But I don't believe that the conversation we've been having regarding design is really relevant. Frankly, I do think that when a owner comes forth or an applicant comes forth and says, we need functional relief, we have a hardship, then we can talk about a roof, raising a roof. But that's not what's happening here. That's part of it. What we have here, I think, is the gut. I don't know what's happening on the interior, but I just think there's a lot more here than meets the eye. And I believe, if we just pass it through, we're going to, somebody was talking about regret about a dormer. Well, I think this could be problematic. Maybe not unlike 12 Harrison, where there were structural implications. Once you start reframing, you start doing significant reframing on the interior of the building, as well as in modifying openings. Okay.
I have to say, Mr. Morgan, you're absolutely right as far as, and I often remind both members of the public and the commission itself, why, what our charter is, and you're correct that, our focus should be on the, looking at things from the perspective of preservation, historical features, that, as you've said. And I suspect you're right in that, yeah, you make a very valid point, in my opinion, that it is more than just raising the roof, because there are those other changes which you've done a good job of pointing out. So thank you for that. It's very much appreciated. So we need to bring this to a conclusion for tonight anyway. I suppose another alternative would be, well, I don't think it serves either us or the applicant to just continue it. So I think it'd be best to go ahead and make the motion and see if it has a majority to bring it to passage. And if not, then we can take it from there. Is that people agreeable with that? On the commission I'm referring to. And Joe, I see your hand is still up. Were you done though? Okay, thanks, Joe. So would someone like to make the motion? But just to be clear, the motion is to approve these plans, which if you have any reservation, taking into consideration Mr. Morgan's comments and all the other comments that have been made and putting them into the context of, what our role as the, for lack of a better term, guardians of preservation is, then vote appropriately, put it this way. Okay, so shall I go ahead and make the motion, or would someone like to make that from the committee? Not hearing anyone step forward. Okay, so the motion is very simple. The motion is to approve these plans. So I'm going to ask for do a roll call vote. So you're either in favor or not. Mr. Carmarth, I'm going to skip over you because for the reasons I already expressed. So I'll go to Mr. Fay. Peter, Chris, you there?
Hold on. Sorry, I lost my microphone.
Yep, you're back.
I think I would, based upon the arguments made, vote no.
Okay.
And try again.
Yep, that's fine. Mr. McNamee?
I would vote no.
Okay, Mr. Morgan?
No.
Okay, Patricia's not here. Mr. Ron Zamba?
No.
Okay. I guess that I'll make it unanimous then, because there are some reservations. So that motion doesn't pass. Where it's getting late, but I do want to at least give some direction to the applicant, which we can further add to over the next couple of days if need be. But I don't want to put you on the spot, Joe Morgan, but since you, I think you very ably identified some of the key things, and others did as well. So could those of you who feel they have a specific item of feedback for the applicant, could you, raise your hand and be recognized so you can, provide that feedback now so they can know how they can, modify their proposal to make it more acceptable? Okay, Joe, you're recognized.
I think that the existing windows in their entirety, all of them need to remain as is. I could entertain the rear elevation as being modified. The roof line change should respect the existing ridge. It should not be raised. It should not be modified. That existing framing of the front of the roof should remain as is, and the rear can be modified in whatever manner is required, I believe, in order to accommodate additional head height.
Okay, so, and just make sure I heard you right, as far as the rear elevation, sound like you said that raising that for additional headroom was okay, but you want to keep the existing ridge where it is.
Yes,
right?
the existing ridge behind the chimney,
Right.
That would remain. That's right.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Anyone else? I know I thought Peter or Christopher, you might have some other comments. Anyone? Yep, go ahead, Peter. You're recognized.
I would say that I would like to see the window arrangement on both side elevations stay as it is. I'm not in sync with Commissioner Morgan with regards to the windows themselves. I think that the replacement windows are an appropriate size and style. He makes a very good point about the roof line, just raising that straight up as opposed to moving the ridge back. So I'd echo what he says there. And I also, with regards to the back, I really have no issues. The
Okay.
back elevation.
All right. So you also, did I hear you right? You wanted to keep the existing ridge line?
If possible, yeah.
Okay. And just to be clear, sorry to go back to you, Joe. You said the existing window should remain. Did you mean just the size and placement? Because I think what Peter is saying is that to replace some of those not particularly historically accurate or good windows now with 6/6s would be appropriate.
That's fine. I'm talking
Okay.
about the openings, the
Right.
sizes and locations of the openings.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought you meant. All right, thank you for that clarification. Okay, any other comments? I think as long as we're, at least there's some positive, I think that the sense I got of the commission, this is directed towards Mr. Brown and company, that that the changes to the front seem to be looked upon favorably, with the one exception of the change to the ridge line. So I hope that is helpful to you. And I'm as with the prior applicant, I'm reasonably optimistic that we will, without too much more time going by, be able to come to some sort of agreement on something that we can both be happy with. I'm sorry we didn't quite get there tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was clear direction. Thank you.
All right. You're very welcome. And thanks for your patience on that. Okay, I'd like to move on to another one. This is 98 State Street. I don't think this one will be quite so
I just needed to say that I'm here. I got here at 8:48. Just you would ask me to let you know when I got here.
Thank you very much. That's the voice of Patricia Pecknick, one of our commissioners. So she'll be joining us for those items on the agenda, starting with this one here, 98 State Street. This one is pretty straightforward. This is that small parking lot on Harris Street opposite the public library. There's a rather poor, there's a fence in rather poor shape. That's, yep. Thank you, Andy. This greenish line here shows the location of the current fence. It's between the lot and the buildings that going up State Street. There is no fence on the Harris Street kind of side. And the proposal is to replace that with a new fence that's, is there something that shows the design of the new fence, Andy? The DOD ordinance was triggered because it's a 6 foot or higher, and that triggers a DOD review. So this is not the exact one, but this is the proposed style of the new fence. And I don't know if you've got it. Is there a photo of the existing fence, Andy?
Yeah, sure. Let me just show you by comparison. I think folks would probably all agree that this is a pretty straightforward improvement on the fencing. Let me just give you that's the proposed, like you said. I'll show you the existing.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a stockade style, if I recall.
Yeah, that's a better.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah, there are a lot of these around. So in fact, I used to have one that I've gotten rid of on my property. All right, so this is the existing one. You can see it's propped up. It's kind of not in great shape. It's that old, kind of stockade style fence, and you saw the proposed fence. So what is the DOD asks for well, technically they want a historical report indicating that this is fine. So what I would propose is that a motion that the commission goes on record, we will take a vote on it, that they are not opposed to this particular fence replacement. They don't see it as inappropriate or deleterious, and authorize the chair to write a very brief report to that effect to kind of give our okay. So, but before we make such a motion, I'll ask if the commissioners have any questions or comments. Not seeing or hearing any. So would someone like to make such a motion? Remember, the chair doesn't usually make the motions.
This is Peter McNamee. I move that we vote in, or that the stockade fence come down and the proposed fence be approved.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Is there a second for that?
Okay.
Okay, is that Malcolm?
Yeah.
Thank you, Malcolm. Just trying to make a note here, and I'll go through the roll call. So Malcolm, you are the first on my roll call here. Your vote on this?
Yeah, I moved that this fence come down and the new one go up.
Yep. Okay, Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ms. Picnic?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Ron Ziemba?
Yes.
Thank you. The chair is also yes. So Andy, I suspect that the so-called historical report will be fairly brief on this one, but the board is on record as being okay with it. So I think we'll be, so we should be able to get that done.
Thank you. Thank you. We were happy to see that this was a brief item for your agenda tonight. So
Yeah, really. Okay. Next item on the agenda, 93 State Street. This is the Institution for Savings address. Should be as if you didn't know. The reason we're here tonight back on this is based on the discussion at the last meeting, your dear chair, that's me, wrote up a report for the planning board. Questions were raised as to whether that report accurately reflected the views of all members, because there had not been an actual vote at the meeting, similar to the one we just had, for example, on this fence, indicating where the members all stood. Were they on agreement? So there was an issue raised as to whether the report correctly represented the views of all the members. So we're back here to correct that, and hopefully you've had a chance to review the report. The way I think makes the most sense to approach this would be to, similar to actually what we did a couple items back, where we can have a motion that the board supports and is in agreement with the report, but if there are any negative votes on that, what I would do is anyone who disagrees, we can take your amendments and edits or changes that you feel need to be made, because I would like I'd love to end up with a report that everyone's in favor of. Anyone have any questions on that?
Mr. Chair, before we get into that, if I may, once again, because I'm a neighbor and an interested party, I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I should have mentioned that. That was Peter McNamee. He is not an abutter, but a neighbor, so he has been recusing himself from all the discussions on this particular project. Thank you, Peter. Sorry, I didn't point that out. Thank you. So I hope you have a chance to have read the report. So I'd like to, well, I'll go ahead and, Ron, I see a hand up. Did you have a question or a comment?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'll make the motion that I want a vote of the commission that they approve of the report as written. Please feel free to vote either way. And if for any negative vote, I'll be happy to take your amendments after that vote. All right. Is there a second for that?
Yeah, I second it.
Okay, thank you. That was Ms. Pecnick. So I'll go through my role here. Now, Malcolm, I know that while you couldn't, you had some audio issues, would I be correct that you were able to be present for the prior discussions on this?
I was there for part of it, so I'm going to hold off for now.
Okay, all right. I'll make a note of that then. So you'll abstain from voting on this. Thank you. Mr. Fay?
I would vote yes in support of the report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McNamee.
He recused himself.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Mr. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay. Ron Ziemba.
Yes.
Okay, and Chris, I'm yes. Okay, so it sounds like people didn't have any objections to what I said in there. Well, that's good. I tried very hard to draft a report that would reflect all views and sides of that particular argument. So I'm glad we're all on record for that. Plus, it saves me the trouble of having to make edits and rewrite it and so on. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so the planning board did ask that we verify that that was in fact the case and get back to them on that. So I will either directly or well, actually through the planning board, I'll pass along to them that they can consider that draft report to be the approved report of the entire commission, except for those who've recused themselves or been absent. Okay, another potentially contentious one here, or at least puzzling one. I don't know. Well, maybe I shouldn't editorialize. 12-14 Harrison Street is the next item on our agenda. This was the house on Harrison Street. It's near the rail trail, going back to last late spring, early summer, where we had a review, and this was started out as a roofline change triggering a demo delay review. The house was voted historically significant, preferably preserved. Under some somewhat semi-unusual circumstances, they did get approval from this board to proceed with some changes, which included raising the roof by what started out as 3 feet. They came down to 18 inches. There were some other changes. I'm not going to go through all of them for the sake of time. So they had that approval. They went from us to the ZBA, where I believe they needed an approval for the upward extension of the nonconformity. That's similar to the thing we just discussed on Hancock Street, where because there's a nonconformity, it could have been something as simple as they're not 10 feet from the street, right? Like so many houses. But if they're going up, that's an upward extension. They need an approval. So, and they got that. Now, during when they started work, as we all know, they exceeded the remit of their demolition permit, and which resulted in a stop work order and a subsequent imposition of a 3-year delay, which was part of the ordinance, was what the ordinance demands. At our last meeting, we heard from the applicant and their attorneys as to what the reasons why, evidence for, and so on, back and forth. At the time, I had written or drafted a historical review, which is where we stand. Let me back up a few seconds. This is back before the Zoning Board of Appeals, because they have now asked for a special permit for demolition of more than 25%. But it's a little bit unusual in that the demolition of more than 25% has already been done. So, but that's where that stands. And there's also this 3-year delay, which there's a potential appeal on, but that's temporarily been put on the back burner while they, discuss this possible after the fact relief and so on. Now, I went back and revisited my historical report, which basically kind of imagined that the house was still standing and talked about it and so on. I went back over the past couple of days and tried to rewrite that. So I thought what I would do tonight is review that revised historical report, which you have not seen yet. Well, you've seen, some of it hasn't changed, so that much you've seen, and see if we can get, if the board is comfortable with this particular report being passed on to the ZBA. It's not the decision as to things like whether they should be relieved of the 3-year delay, whether they should get a permit, and so forth. you know, a lot of the details as to exactly what's going to happen with this is out of our hands for the most part. We've just been asked to weigh in on the historical with this historical report. So let me take a little sip of water here so I can talk again. And I'll just do a quick check-in with you all. What I want to do is relay to you what this report says. What did I do? Hopefully I didn't quit out of it. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I accidentally minimized my Zoom window. There we go, back again. Thank you. Just wanted to see if anyone had an objection to proceeding that way. And I do see a hand. Ms. Pecknick, you're recognized?
No, I'm not objecting to how you're proceeding. I do have a lot to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I can wait till you're done presenting the report.
Let me see. Let me just think for a second what makes the most sense in logical order. I think if you're willing to let me go through this exercise just to see where everyone stands, and if everyone's agreeing with what I say here, it may even influence what you've got to say. So why don't go ahead and do that if people are in agreement. It's relatively short, so it won't take long to get through anyway. The report will be dated both today and 22 October, which is when we last met. The executive summary says this report refers to a structure that no longer exists as it would have been had the special permit application been submitted at the appropriate time. Therefore, the Historical Commission cannot provide a valid historical report to assess the grant of a permit for demolition over 25%. We provide here the historical information available to us in the hope it may be useful to the Zoning Board of Appeals, or as the SPGA, that's the Special Permit Granting Authority. Then I go into the project description, which I review the proposal that was presented to us, which was A, demolish an existing rear section and build a new addition on the same footprint, and B, elevate the gambrel roof of the original or historical structure to increase ceiling height and accommodate a proposed roof deck. The proposal now also includes substantial demolition of exterior walls and framing, which the applicant states is necessary to execute that original plan. And the plans of record are noted. I don't need to go through that. They're just the dates of the various plans that were submitted. Okay, then I go into the significance of the historic building / structure proposed for partial demolition. This property is listed on the district data sheet as contributing to the National Historic District and is described in an accompanying Form B compiled by the Mass Historical Commission. In 1980, when that survey was done, the house still maintained much of its characteristic 18th century appearance and was described as, quote, an excellent example of the 2.5-story gambrel roofed home built in Newburyport during the 18th century, unquote. The photograph from that time shows that the structure retained much of its original form and character. More recently, probably in the early 80s, this structure saw poorly executed alterations, probably in order to create multiple dwelling units. The additions to the rear of the house ruined its characteristic roof line. Guess I'm injecting my opinion there. Next section, the relative importance of such historic building structure to its setting within the district. According to the 1851 plan of Newburyport, the house was then owned by the Lunt family, who were active in the shipbuilding and fishing industries in the Joppa district. In 1872, Benjamin Lunt was in residence. He was a pilot, undoubtedly serving area merchants and ship owners. The property was owned also by the Newburyport City Railroad Company, briefly in the 1870s, and a railroad bed was laid behind the house, which is now the Clipper City Rail Trail. The structure is an important contributor to the overall impression on a visitor to Newburyport's south end. This area contains many older structures, but few this old and well preserved, of course, until it was modified in the 80s. And of course, well, let me just stick to what I've written here, but few this old and well preserved until it was modified in the 80s. The house is also quite visible from the Newburyport Rail Trail, which directly abuts it to the northwest. And then finally, section on recommendations to the Special Permit Granting Authority. The Zoning Board of Appeals, or ZBA, in deciding whether or not to grant a special permit, will need to consider both the structural conditions that may or may not justify demolition and the proposed plans for the new addition and the existing historic structure as to their impact on the historical character and values of the neighborhood. When the NHC voted to allow the project, we had several reservations and recommendations, and recent events appeared to have justified our concerns, period. In our first meeting, the applicant expressed a willingness to work with the commission and made some modifications to the original plan at our request. While we had reservations about raising the roof, we felt that restoring the characteristic gambrel roof line and removing some badly executed alterations from the 80s would improve the overall impression of the house. You might recall that from our first discussion. Actually, I interjected that that's not in the report. The report just says would improve the overall impression of the house, period. At the second review meeting, an attorney for the applicant argued that the NHC had little or no oversight authority over the overall plans, and as a result, we were pressured into agreeing to aspects of the plan that we did not fully support, such as a roof deck. That legal argument was later determined to be incorrect, but by then it was too late and the project was set into motion. When work on the project began, the applicant conducted extensive demolition, greatly exceeding that authorized under his permit. He was found in violation, ordered to halt work, and subjected to a 3-year moratorium on future building permits as required by ordinance. The NHC understands that the applicant may appeal this penalty or seek other relief from the ZBA, but we feel it's inappropriate for the NHC, that's the Newburyport Historical Commission, to offer any direction or opinion to the ZBA as to what action, if any, they should take. End of report. So that's what I've written, such as it is. So I would very much like to get, if not at least a straw poll on whether that conforms to the impressions of the board. But before that, Patricia, you're welcome to weigh in on this or anything else, before we do that.
Yeah, so I feel that in the recommendation section, then we are being asked to advise the ZBA whether or not the ZBA should grant the applicant the DCOD special permit to approve the work that was already done without the permit. So the normal procedure for our review of a DCOD special permit would be to talk about the character of the house in the neighborhood. We did that. We did that last time. We discussed the house that used to be there and the historic neighborhood context. Of course, we can't go back now in history and evaluate the condition of a house that doesn't exist and talk about what work should or shouldn't have been permitted had the permit been sought. But I believe we are being asked to advise them about whether or not we would approve of such a permit being granted, which is like if you needed to perform a medical procedure on a patient and you're the doctor, you didn't get consent to do it. And now the patient has died and the body's cremated. And we're being asked to conclude that the medical procedure that was performed without consent and that was the cause of the patient's death was medically necessary. So in my opinion, in the recommendation section, we must advise the ZBA that the NHC doesn't recommend the approval of the DCOD special permit. I believe we're also being asked to advise the ZBA whether or not the commission wishes to have the 3-year moratorium on the building permit lifted. And we did say at the last meeting, no, a bunch of us said, no, we don't wish for it to be lifted. The intent of the DCOD ordinance, as explained in 28B under purposes, is to protect the architectural history of the city through the regulation of proposed demolition of historic buildings and structures located in residential neighborhoods of the city, which will help to maintain and perpetuate the established skill of local architects, craftspeople, and tradespeople. So if the historic house was still there, of course, that would fulfill the intent of the ordinance. If the house needed so much work on the exterior walls and the applicant had stopped and gotten a permit and hired some local tradespeople to repair the walls and the house survived, that would fulfill the intent of the ordinance. But the intent of the ordinance is to prevent demolishing the architectural fabric of the city. It's to not empower contractors to make those on the fly decisions in the field. So I believe in the recommendation section that we must advise against the lifting of the moratorium. And I believe we concluded that, some of us at least did at the last meeting, Are we really able to conclude that the applicant, in good faith, accidentally, unintentionally demolished parts of the house that he didn't know were historic, and didn't know he needed a permit to demolish? I conclude no. I looked at every single document, hearing, the demo permit that was submitted, the Form B, the district data sheet. On Tuesday night of this week, the applicant went to the ZBA and said that the house is not registered on a list of historical properties. It is so listed and by the federal government, by the state. It's on our district data sheets. In the appeal, and those documents aren't before us, the applicant says that all they want to do is restore some of the historical features of the property that construction had eliminated. And this is not a restoration project anymore. Restoration means that you take materials and features from the restoration period, the period of the house's significance, and you keep them, and you remove elements that aren't from that period. So in the appeal, just so everyone on the commissioner knows, the applicant says that imposing the sanction of this 3-year moratorium will not, quote, benefit the city or its residents, and it will. It benefits the city, and it benefits the residents, and it benefits this commission to uphold the law. It benefits me as the owner of an historic house when other historic houses aren't demolished. The market value of my house is predicated on its setting among other historic houses. Sort of the aesthetic value of my house is a function of its setting within that collection of historic houses. This is actually reflected in the DCOD ordinance. It says the preservation, rehabilitation, and enhancement of the city's historic character is critical to the preservation of the city's heritage and land values. So it benefits the city and its residents when the preservation ordinances are upheld. And if it doesn't, then I don't know what we're doing here, spending, hours and days and weeks talking about this stuff, only to get where we're here again. And I would also like to speak to our practices as a commission so that we can maybe take something away from this experience. To the extent that the demo delay ordinance is there to prevent, quote, inappropriate alterations to rooftops, I would propose that we as a commission start to be a little more particular and specific in the way that we define what constitutes an inappropriate alteration to a rooftop. So is demolishing the entire roof an inappropriate alteration? I would argue that it is, and that roof demo should be done because there is documentable evidence of existing structural problems with a roof. Almost all the time, that would be the condition. And it's really backwards in this case. We allowed the applicant to create and intensify structural problems or claim structural problems through the roof demo. So I think that when people constantly buy an historic house, we need to think about whether or not we want those houses constantly sort of, I guess, suburbanizing. So if we're still going to entertain all these roof raising arguments and applications, then haven't we at least had enough of taking applicants' words for it that the houses can withstand this sort of extensive interior demo and roof demo without getting a report from an independent structural engineer?
Right.
I picked up the phone today. I called Cambridge Historical Commission to ask about their process for certifying to themselves that a house can endure roof raising. And they said, well, of course, sometimes, rarely, we allow roof raisings if it's a very small house. Mm-hmm. And then we sort of compared the process that we go through and that they go through to evaluate the condition of a structure before a roof demo can be approved. And I felt ridiculous saying that our process is hope. Our process is trust. It's blind faith. We cross our fingers. That's our process. And I told him about the houses that we've lost to roof demo, and he was shocked. And, again, emphasizing the importance of having an independent city-selected structural engineer give a second opinion on the heels of the applicant's paid engineer's report. So I'm really appealing to this commission. Please, let's not make this mistake ever again of just saying, if the applicant wants to do it, then it's probably going to be okay. And please, if we approve the demo, can we make it a condition that even if not all the old timbers or all the framing can be saved, can we take those materials and say, if they're in sound condition, they should be incorporated into a new roof and the framing so that the historic materials are still constituent elements of the new construction. Otherwise, everything goes in the dumpster.
Right.
So with this house, we have to take the district data sheet and cross out 12 Harrison. We have to take the Form B on the house and retire it.
Yeah.
And then we have to tell Mass Historic that we lost a house on our watch. So for me in the recommendations, we have to say that we support the continued imposition of the demolition of the moratorium on getting the building permit, and that we would not approve retroactively a DCOG special permit.
Okay. And all right, so let me just check one thing, see if there's anyone else with a hand up. I see a couple of hands up, but all right, so I'll hold off. But I did, while you were talking, Patricia, I rewrote a new final sentence that I think is more in line with what you just said, but I'll hold off on that. Were you done? Because your hand is still up.
Okay, yeah, I'm done. I want to make up for being absent by talking a lot.
No, you were fine. Okay, Mr. McNamee.
Well, I can't be as complete as Becknick, but I can agree with everything that she said, and we should definitely express an opinion and advise the ZBA that we are wholly in favor of the moratorium. I feel very strongly about that. This sort of thing, there's no reason to have these guidelines and these ordinances and whatnot if, as soon as they're ignored, inadvertently or otherwise, if we just say, well, that's okay, we'll let you go, because just as with an earlier property this evening, I said, the city, these treasures disappear in dribs and drabs. These ordinances need to have teeth, and I don't want to encourage anyone else to seek forgiveness rather than permission.
Okay. Anything? Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Mr. Morgan, your hand is up. You're recognized.
Thank you. I found some interesting language in David Mack's letter, the attorney for the applicant, his letter of October 1st. And the last paragraph on page 5 says, the only change, speaking about the current SP application, is the framing, an interior feature. So that sort of, I think, to me, represents an attitude of the applicant relative to the task at hand, that anything within the surfaces, the finished surfaces of the structure was fair game. They don't see any real issue here. The only change, they said, in their current special permit application really is the framing. Everything else remains the same. Okay, so they're minimizing the fact that these original materials were really part of I think the intent of our acknowledgement or our approval of their proposal. The next thing he mentions, I believe it's in that same paragraph, is that the petitioner is better preserving the property in accordance with the zoning ordinance's expressed intention that historic structures shall be preserved and repaired where reasonably feasible. Now, given that there's not a lot left of this particular structure, neither in terms of preservation or repair, maybe certain parts that are invisible below grade are repaired, but all the superstructure, I believe, is almost entirely new. Then it seems what they're saying is that they made the reasonable conclusion that it was infeasible to preserve other portions of the building, and they made the decision to reframe the exterior walls. So either there's something a little lacking in the language of the ordinance relative to these interior features that are invisible, such as the vintage materials incorporated into the walls and roofs of these structures, or the interpretation is a very loose one and a very liberal one in terms of what their proposal was, and we just didn't catch it. The Historic Commission did not understand that we were granting them a much greater leeway than we were aware of. So I think Commissioner Pecknick has it right. We have to do more. We have to be more diligent up front and really understand what the scope of the proposals are, and that includes interior renovations. When you've got a building like this and you basically remove all of this structure, including the bones, the timber frame, you leave it weakened. And a 150-year-old building, you can't rely on its exterior walls to keep it to keep everything structurally sound and resist lateral forces, and to provide additional current code requirements for live loading, et cetera. I think the engineering report, the conditions report from a structural engineer is absolutely necessary. And I think that it's not just about the existing structure, it's a third-party engineering report about the proposed modifications to the existing structure. If what's going on inside is going to compromise the integrity of the structure, then we have to know about it before the work is undertaken. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Who else? Mr. Fay has a hand up.
I'll try to be brief because I agree with everything that's been said, but and especially what Patricia said. And I just want to reiterate something that I said earlier tonight that is oftentimes repeated, and we do debate this, which is it's not our, as I interpret it, not our charge to determine the livability of a house. It's not our decision to say it's okay for you to turn your attic into a third floor office. Okay. I think that belongs to somebody else. What our responsibility is, in my opinion, is to make sure that if you want to move the family up to the third floor, that you do it within the confines of the historic house. And that's the first thing that we do. We identify a house as an historic building. And once we do that, we have a responsibility to do our best to make sure that that house that's been in existence for 200 years, without a roof deck, without a set of dormers, without a mudroom, without a new entrance, that somehow people generation after generation have lived in those homes. And we've arrived at a place, at least in my experience here in 2020, 2019, 2018, where it's seemingly, I got to have everything. And that's exhausting me. It really is. The number of times people have said, look, I can't possibly live here in Newburyport without a third floor attic dwelling with a couple of dormers winging out to the side. And Malcolm has said it many times, I'm not sure that this is the best place for you then. You bought a historic home. The picture is worth 1,000 words. This is what happens. And this isn't the only time this has happened. It happened on Bromfield Street. It happened before I joined, just down the road. I don't remember what street is where the building was demolished. Patricia's absolutely right. If we're responsible for this, and this house is a good example of us sort of saying we're okay with all the different sort of modern things you want to do to this house, and the next thing you know, this is what it looks like. So I feel really bad that this happened to this house, because I'm going to take responsibility for that. That I was part of the commission that essentially gave a guy. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but you are who you say you are. As soon as you come in the door, you announce who you are, okay? As soon as we had a lawyer lecturing us about what we were allowed to say and not say, that was a deal breaker. That right away, I could tell that this was not going to go well. I didn't expect this, but I could tell that this was not going to go well, that this person was going to get what they wanted come hell or high water. So I'll end on that note. Thank you.
And I just add really quickly, one of the most revealing and I think important things that Chris, that you've ever said was about a month ago or so when you said, I don't know, maybe I belong on, you know, more like on the Preservation Commission. And I thought, isn't that sad that we don't think of ourselves that like you are, you know what I mean? That's what we're supposed to be, the Historic Preservation Commission. So yeah, I appreciate everybody's thoughts about this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. What I did was, while Patricia was talking, well, I'll ask you, well, I rewrote the final sentence originally said that, you know, we understand the applicant may appeal his penalty, blah, 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 but we feel it's inappropriate for the NHG to offer any direction or opinion to the ZBA as to what action, if any, they should take. That was the original sentence and the final sentence of the report. So I'm proposing this alternate final sentence. Since the structure, since the structure which we would be reviewing is no longer available, we cannot provide a correct review to the ZBA, and therefore cannot recommend approval of a special permit nor relief from the 3-year moratorium on future permits. Would that be, so I don't know if hopefully you remember what the rest of the report said. Does that sound more like, at least to me, that seems more like in keeping what you guys have just been saying?
Yeah, I think we do not recommend rather than cannot. We do not recommend relief from the moratorium, and we do not recommend approval of the permit because that's what we're being asked to do, that recommend. So no, we don't, we can't recommend that.
Or even stronger language is recommend against.
Yeah, I prefer recommend against too, but yeah.
Okay, you prefer that, hey? Doing this live, yeah, recommend.
This is like, I just wanted to say something, Malcolm, but this is not only putting a mustache on the Mona Lisa, this is like putting a mustache on the Mona Lisa and then ripping it out of its frame and setting it on fire. It's a complete and total blatant disregard for preservation, disregard for an important American historical piece of architecture. And in Newburyport, we're blessed with a lot of these. It seems like around 1800, which is what I put this building at. And I think it's a vernacular federal. But I think we can't be strong enough on I'd almost recommend a 5-year delay. This is like, our city is really under assault. And it's just very difficult to deal with these people because they're coming in here from who knows where, and they're trashing our historic architecture, and it's we've got to get a grip on it.
All right, well, Malcolm, you've done it. I didn't think anyone would surpass Patricia's amazing analogy of the patient with the
cremated body.
Yes, right. Yes, an unauthorized operation. But I think you've done it with the Mona Lisa analogy.
Yeah, welcome back, Malcolm. I've missed you. It's so good to hear you again.
Anyway, so I have rewritten that sentence a second time. Actually, all I changed was. Cannot provide a correct review of the ZBA, and therefore recommend against approval of a special permit, nor, see, now I have to change this to recommend against approval of special permit.
And against the lifting of the moratorium.
And yeah, I have to change that. And well, we really just need to say and relief or. Okay, against approval of a special permit and/or relief from the 3-year moratorium on future permits.
Well, and, you know, I don't know.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're worried about
things,
or.
Right?
Yeah. Yep, I changed it to just and. Yeah, because legally the or might be misconstrued.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you remember. Well, the rest of the report was pretty straightforward anyway. So given that change, do people, would someone like to make a motion that the Newburyport Historic Commission is okay with forwarding this report to the ZBA?
So moved.
Okay, that was Peter, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. That was Mr. Fay. Okay, go through my roll here. Mr. Carnwath,
Yeah,
Mr. Fay,
Yes.
Mr. McNamee,
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
I have to vote no.
Okay. Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Ron Ziemba.
Yes.
Okay. I'll vote yes, but I would like to, Mr. Morgan, is there an additional change that would make you more amenable to it, or is there something else that's?
Simply, I don't think we should be making any recommendation regarding the 3-year moratorium. That's not our job. I don't think. I think that's it. That's the only objection I have.
Okay.
It is in the ordinance, though. It mentions that it can't be lifted without written permission, without an NHC in writing advising NHC that it can be lifted.
Yeah, I think that's how that's coming in, Joe. In the actual ordinance, and I did look at that, one of the ways of lifting that 3-year moratorium is okay from the Historical Commission, AKA us. So I think that's why Patricia and others felt that that was appropriate to put in there. Is that?
Yeah, but I feel that there could be an unintended consequence. I mean, I think that there's still the problem of the hulk that's remaining here. How does it get repaired? How does it get fixed for the neighborhood? And I think by reinforcing the moratorium, you know, that I don't, if we get involved, we're saying that it's not important what happens to the building as it exists. And I think it's very important for the neighborhood that it be, you know, that the original design gets implemented. I don't know how, but I think by talking about the consequences of what's been done, it doesn't solve the problem, actually, in terms of the structure itself.
Right. Well, that's a good point.
I think the problem will get solved.
Well, perhaps we should add language addressing what Joe Morgan is saying.
Yeah, I really don't think that's it for today. I think there's an appeal. I think this is going beyond us to the zoning board, and then the whole decision is being appealed. I feel like we should just stick to what we were being asked, which is what do we recommend on those 2 matters? And
yeah, what Joe,
I cannot go beyond that for legal reasons. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, Patricia, I didn't mean to step on your comments there.
Okay.
Joe, what she's referring to is she and I are aware of, you know, that I'm sure that there are this particular case is a big deal in the city, as I'm sure you acknowledge. We haven't explicitly said it here, but I don't think anyone, even us, wants to see a house with a big tarp over it for 3 years, right? So, but I don't know what the solution is, and that's kind of out of our hands for the most part. So all I can really say is that I know people are working to try to find a resolution to that.
Are we trying to prevent the owner from completing his project, or are we trying to prevent the owner's contractor from completing the project? Who is the subject of the moratorium?
The DCOD, upholding the DCOD ordinance is just that's just, we're just defending the ordinance, the process. We're just talking about the house that was there. It's not there anymore. We were asked to advise to, you know, approve the permit on work retroactively. We can't because there's no house there. We can't inspect it and see if the work needs to be done. And then we're asked to advise that the moratorium be lifted so the work can be completed. I think that we cannot advise that. I'm sure the ZBA will take our deliberations into consideration and they will work things out the way that they want to. But I don't see the point in going beyond what we've been asked to talk about tonight, right now. I'm sure our discussions are not over. I feel like they should be over for now.
I'm thinking, Patricia, that if we ended the sentence and therefore recommend against approval of a special permit, period, the 3-year moratorium is in place. Like we're not explicitly saying we're for it or again or whatever, but obviously if we wanted to relieve it, we have that in our power. Obviously, we're not about to do that. Would people object to just ending the sentence there so that it's not, the sentence isn't misconstrued to say that we would be opposed under any circumstances or any arrangement arrived at by the planning board, the city, whoever gets involved in the city, to come up with something that they're okay with, that we would somehow be against it?
I really don't want to make it so complicated.
Well, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I am trying to simplify it by just leaving it at recommending against approval of the special permit, which
I think not addressing the other issue makes it complicated.
I agree with Patricia on that. I think that the language should stay as it is.
Okay, then what I can do, Joe, is I can just make add as a footnote that one member did express that. I'm happy to include that if you'd like.
That's fine. That's perfect.
Okay. All right. So I will do that. Add that that note of that member. All right. Well, thank you very much. We just have a couple other fairly quick things. I hope, since the hour grows late. 159, it's under the heading of correspondence, 159 Merrimack Street. You might recall this was a property that we had given conditional approval of. The condition was that they submit this sort of what I call a schedule of materials and so on to the planning office. Joe, you might recall this because that was your suggestion. In their submitted plans, they were a little vague on, they talked verbally in the meeting about, window treatments and so on, but it wasn't specifically called out on the plans. They have submitted those detailed plans. I've seen them. You've probably seen them as well if you've looked. And so they have met that condition. And so there's no further vote on this. This is just an FYI for the team here that they have met the condition of our conditional approval. And so they've been approved to go forward. The next item is a reminder. Well, the ordinance under which the Newburyport Historical Commission is organized was amended recently, and in the amended ordinance, officers, that is in our case really just the chair and the vice chair, are elected each year. That is something new that was added. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So sometime probably at a meeting in January, I imagine, we will address that. So I want you to think about it. Think if anyone would like to throw their hat into the ring for either of those. You're not by no means required to, in fact, I got to think about it. At this point, I'm leaning towards maintaining my hat in the ring, but anyway, do think about it. Anyone is welcome to take a stab at it. And as again, that's coming in the beginning of next year. So do give that some thought and consideration. The only things we have left are approval of the minutes from the 22nd of October and adjournment. So on the minutes, there were a couple of minor corrections. One that I should bring to your attention was about, because it was sort of significant. Now I'm trying to remember because I don't have it in front of me. And that's that, let me think for a second. I think it was in relationship to 1214 Harrison Street, the comment about no additional demolition. No, Gretchen, can you help me out here if you're there and can somehow speak to that? It was just one word.
it was intentional and you said it was supposed to be additional.
Right, was it Harrison Street?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, it was one word that was different. The person was saying that we were,
The Mark Griffin letter.
right, said that there was no addition, right, that's it now. In Mark Griffin's letter, which goes way back to the spring, he said, doesn't meet the 25% threshold because no additional demolition to the walls is being done. The word intentional was accidentally transposed for additional. So that was the change. It was just a correction on that. Did anyone else have any other corrections? I saw a hand there. Patricia, was there a?
No, not about the minutes. I want to say something else after we're done with the
Oh,
minutes.
okay. So is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended? Someone?
This is Joe. This is
Yeah.
Joe. I move that we approve the minutes from.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Is there a
10/22.
second? Thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fay. Okay, Malcolm, well, you were here to hear all that, right? So I assume it's, are you in a position to vote on that? Were you still connected and hearing all of that meeting, so can vote on those minutes?
Oh, man, I don't think I can.
Okay, all right, so I'll put an abstention for you. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Ziemba?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll also approve them. So that is carried. Before the motion to adjourn, did you have something else to say, Patricia?
I just want to say, yes, I'm sorry, it's my fault I wasn't here. I'm sorry. And I'll listen to the recording tomorrow and know what happened. I did make my husband and son listen and I got Post-its. But I did want to say, I understand there wasn't public comment on the first matter, 490 Merrimack. I do know that there was an abutter who was, potentially going to support and ask questions. And I know there were other abutters who were concerned about it. And I think that when we don't have public comment, we deprive ourselves of really important information about the house history. I know one of the people was going to speak, knew this Mrs. Sullivan, who lived there for 60 years, knew something about the house history and so on. So I hope we don't, end up not getting information that might help us in our deliberations by not having public comment. Again, I don't know what happened, but just so you know, there were people that were there who I think would have spoken.
I'm not seeing it in my notes here, but I believe we did not take a vote.
Oh, okay.
We took a vote on whether it was historically significant and preferably preserved. Oh, I know what the problem was. Because of the condition issues, the vote was that it was historically significant but not preferably preserved. So it didn't go to a demo plan review, and that's why there wasn't a public hearing.
Well, that's too bad. I think that it would have been very informative to hear from people who wanted to see, some improvements to the site, and also from people who knew something about the house. And yeah,
right.
Okay. I'll listen to the recording.
Okay. There is, if they're still around, I'm not sure if they're still on the call. They will have an opportunity for that though, because they have to go before the ZBA to get a permit for some nonconformity. So they will, so abutters and neighbors and any interested party will have an opportunity to at least comment on that plan.
Okay.
For what that's worth. Whew. Okay, are we ready for a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, that sounded like Mr. McNamee.
Yeah, this is Joe, and I second it.
Okay, let me get ready with my roll here. 1 second. Okay, Mr. Carnwath.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Peck, Ms. Peck.
Oh, thanks. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Ziemba.
Yes.
Okay, And the chair is a yes. And by the way, I thought I saw a Dominique in the attendees. So, and I wondered if that was yours.
Yeah, yes, I was in Mexico, so I made my family listen and keep me updated, so.
Virtually in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you all. Long meeting. We are officially adjourned. So I thank you all for your attention and your comments. And with that, I believe we are officially over.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night. Thank you.
night.
Thanks.